So here we are at week 4 and a big game for two divisional rivals. The 2-1 Minnesota Vikings traveling to Soldier Field to take on the 2-1 Chicago Bears. And I cannot oversell enough the importance of this early season game with both teams at 2-1, both teams with playoff aspirations, both teams with eyes potentially on winning the NFC North and getting at least, worst case scenario, a home playoff game. This is a big one in part because you really don't want to go to 2-2 in that division because that division looks like it's going to be a dogfight all year long. Number two, both teams have already suffered early season losses to the Packers. So the Packers not only have the better record, even though they lost on Thursday night to the Eagles, they're at 3-1 now. You look at the Packers, they have the edge over the Bears right now with tiebreaker head-to-head win, tiebreaker edge, head-to-head win over Minnesota. The Packers, early on through the first quarter of the season, have set themselves up well. The Bears, Vikings, both of them don't want to be 2-2 and 0-2 in the division because I can guarantee you this much. While it is not impossible to win your division going 4-2, the reality is it is incredibly difficult to do so. You want to go 5-1, if not 6-0, and being at this stage of the season 0-2 in the division leaves you absolutely no margin for error in what is shaping up to be arguably the toughest, most competitive division in football. So I cannot stress enough the importance of this game for both teams. While it in no way means that if you lose, your season is over, it does put you a little bit behind the 8 ball. There is no question about it. So it's a big one. And looking at it from the Vikings standpoint, you're talking about a team where their early season success has been built in large part around their ability to run the ball. Dalvin Cook has been a stud through the first 3 weeks of the season. This team is averaging over 190 yards rushing per game, going up against a stout Bears defense that is really tough to run against and giving up a little more than 68 yards per game on the ground, which is a consistent theme with what you had last year. The Bears are just really tough to run on. Whether the head coordinator is Vic Fangio or now Chuck Pagano, it does not matter. You look at this Bears team, you talk about in 3 games has given up a total of 39 points. They're playing like an elite defense. Playing like an elite defense. They get after the quarterback, 11 sacks through 3 games and a ton of pressure on quarterbacks consistently, whether it's Aaron Rodgers, whether it is last week and talking about Case Keenum, it doesn't matter. Like Joe Flacco, they're getting there, they're getting some type of pressure. So you look at this, you see in theory 2 relatively evenly matched teams or 2 well-balanced teams, 2 teams that could match up really hard against each other. And I would mostly agree with that assessment. As you look at the Vikings on paper and you say, okay, they got Dalvin Cook, stud in the backfield. They got Diggs and Thielen on the outside of the receiver position, studs on either side. They've got a quarterback that they paid a ton of money to, and they've still got some notable stars on the defense, such as Danielle Hunter and Harrison Smith and Xavier Rhodes. But then you look at the Bears and you say, okay, they've got Allen Robinson on the outside. You've got, if they actually bother to use him, David Montgomery. And if he decides to get his head out of his ass and stop recording live streams after games, Tariq Cohen, then you look at the defense. They've got Khalil Mack. They've got Roquan Smith and Danny Trevathan in the middle. You've got the secondary, and you've got studs like Eddie Jackson and Kyle Fuller. If Hakeem Hicks plays, that's a bonus. If he doesn't, that kind of hurts a little bit. I cannot lie. But 2 teams that are, in theory, a pretty close matchup. In terms of the keys to success and victory for each of these teams, I'll start off with Minnesota. As I mentioned before, the Bears are a really tough team to run against. They have to figure out a way to get Dalvin Cook involved early, even if that means throwing him some stuff out of the backfield initially to get him into a flow, get him into a rhythm, to keep the Bears defense honest. The key to establishing Dalvin Cook initially might not be as a runner. It might be as a receiver in the passing game. But they have to stick with him. He has been their key to success so far this season, and I see no reason that is going to change anytime soon. He's shaping up himself to have a really, really big year. You got to feed him the ball. If the Vikings can realistically, within the flow of the game, get 20 touches for Dalvin Cook, or I should say 20 carries and 25 total touches for him, then that could be a sign of really good things for the Vikings, especially if he has any type of success at all. Another thing, you're talking about a young quarterback on the other side, of Mitchell Trubisky, who coming off of a Week 3 performance that statistically was his best game of the season, but there are still fleas and flaws with that one, believe me. They've got to be able to get to him early. You could say that's kind of basic, but it kind of is. Like, if you can get to Trubisky early, and more specifically, if you can get in the head of that offensive line early, who has been struggling these first 3 weeks of the season, and you can have them lose their confidence a little bit, then it could be a big game for that Vikings front four. It's always talking about the quarterback's confidence when it comes to pressure. You got to say something about the offensive line that actually allows the pressure to come in the quarterback's face. If you can beat that offensive line early, if you could dominate that offensive line early, it could spell trouble for that Bears offense. There's no question about it. And then for the Vikings offensively, Kirk Cousins actually has to show up and play well in a big game. That's asking a lot. But he's got to show up and play well in one big one, doesn't he? Doesn't he? So it'll be an awfully good week for him to do it. As far as the Bears go, their keys to success, their keys to victory, number one, stop Dalvin Cook. If you stop Dalvin Cook, it's going to be a very long day for the Vikings because they're going to have to rely on Kirk Cousins to throw a ton. And if that's going to happen, that's going to be a recipe for success for that Bears defense, because then they can not worry so much about the run. They can tee off and blitz and bring the heat, and they're going to get to Cousins. They're going to mess him up, and he's going to make a big mistake or two. But offensively, they have got to establish David Montgomery. No crapping around, no bullshitting. Even though the offensive line has not been good the first 3 weeks, David Montgomery breaks a lot of initial tackles. David Montgomery has a knack and a feel and a nose for taking a negative yard play and turning it into a 2 or 3 yard gain. A 3-yard run into a 7-yard run. A 4-yard run into an 8, 9, 10-yard run. You have to get him the damn pill. Get him the freaking rock early and often. Similar to where I talked about with Dalvin Cook. 20 carries, 25 total touches. It really needs to be the same formula here for the Chicago Bears. Now, no crapping around, no trying to get cutesy-wootsy or anything like that. Just do the damn thing and get him the damn rock. Early. Consistently. If it doesn't work initially, find other ways. Get him involved in the passing game as a receiver out of the backfield. Line him up in the slot. Line him up outside. Find ways to get David Montgomery the goddamn ball. You took this guy in the 3rd round. Everybody agrees he's a great fit for the scheme. Everybody can see the possibility, the potential of what he could be. Now is the time to unleash it, Matt Nagy! And then for the Bears defensively, you look at their corners with Fuller and Amukamura. I would say this is that, assuming Amukamura is playing, I can't remember if he's hurt or not, or he just sucks right now, as I would say. We've got to take away either Diggs or Thielen. We've got to take away one of those two guys. It's really hard to take away both of them, but you got to take away one of them. If you can limit the Vikings to say they have one real option on the offense, and it's not Dalvin Cook, it's either Diggs or Thielen, then you got to feel pretty good about yourself. And in this case, I might actually take away Adam Thielen, because I think he provides more consistency in that offense, more versatility in that offense as a receiver. That might be the guy that I try to target. Either way, if you take away one of them, you slow down Dalvin Cook, and you establish David Montgomery early and often, it sets yourself up well for success at home. In this matchup overall, it's going to be a featured late afternoon game, which has me excited. It means I don't have to go to the internet to try and watch it. I can actually watch it on my TV via cable. That's exciting stuff. But I expect this to be a close game. And it may come down to which quarterback screws up less and which head coach screws up less in terms of their decision-making, in terms of play calling, and so forth. The Bears had a big win in Week 3, as did the Vikings. When in doubt, you figure the home field advantage gives you usually 2 to 3 points. I think the Bears are 1.5-point favorites heading into this matchup. It's a homer pick, but you could definitely make the argument for it. I'm going to take the Bears to win on Sunday afternoon, 19-15. So all those Vikings fans, Marvelous Mark, all of you, can take your skull horns and stick them where the sun don't shine. Because Khalil, Moab, and Mack and the monsters of the Midway are going to bear down, bitches!